Hi everyone, welcome to episode 3 of the Business as Usual podcast. And we're going to take it back a little bit and look at the last 2 weeks of news stories. So we've got 5 news stories to go through, things that have come out in the last week or so. Some are pretty interesting. Some you might have already heard from your teachers. We're going to start straight away. We're going to start with a bit of an update on the Thomas Cook situation, because there was a big development this week in that Hayes, a travel agent firm, has agreed to buy and run all of their stores. So I think it's something like over 500 stores across the UK that Thomas Cook had, and Hayes are going to open every single one of them. Mike, do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, it's about 551 stores, isn't it? And they're going to be opening from tomorrow, I hear.
They're starting as soon as tomorrow, are they?
Yeah, that's what I've heard. They're gonna get a bit of signage done, so it's Hayes Travel. Thomas Cook will be no more, and yeah, they'll be opening up straight away. And apparently they're just really keen to get the very best employees from Thomas Cook. I think was one of their main attractions of doing it.
So there's 2 parts to it. Obviously, it's 555 stores, 555 stores and 2,500 jobs. So there's 2 assets really that they're trying to take advantage of, and that is obviously the presence of the stores within city centres across the country, and 2,500 of the best employees. So the thing is the main reason they're probably doing this is because it takes the Hayes name nationwide. They get loads of really, really good publicity because of this. Which is going to have a massive impact. So Hayes is based in Sunderland, actually. So it's the wrong side of the northeast, but the northeast nonetheless. So we should have some northeastern pride there. It just increases their sort of scope in the UK massive. At the moment, I think they've only got something like 30 to 40 branches. So this is a huge step. They've got 190 stores, 1,900 staff. But last year only made a profit of 10 million. So you do wonder it's quite a big risk from Hayes, don't you think?
Yeah, that was on 400 million, over 400 million in revenue, weren't it? So obviously students can work out that's a really poor net profit margin.
180 million sales last year.
So yeah, very poor.
Risky, isn't it?
It's risky, but we were talking about this earlier, weren't we, briefly? And I think you said it's only a very short leasehold they're taking. So I suppose it could be worth it just for the publicity alone, if they're only taking the risk for six months. Yeah,
that's worth clarifying. So the way it works is they've taken over the lease arrangements that Thomas Cook had with the landlords for these properties. And as far as I'm aware, the reports sort of vary between 6 months left on that lease, or they have a 6 month when they're taken over, or 12 months. But either way, in 6 months' time or a year's time, they're going to have an out. So they're going to have a situation where in 6 months' time or 1 year's time, they're going to have to go to these landlords for the 555 branches around the UK, and they're going to have to renegotiate the lease. They're obviously going to try and negotiate that down. Whether the landlords will be happy with that is a different matter, but also whether Hayes have managed to sort of manage with the costs. We talked in the last podcast about Thomas Cook about how trends are moving away from people going into travel agencies in the first place. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in 6 months' time, because in 6 months' time, they might well have to renegotiate these leases, or 12 months' time, or whatever it is, and they might find that it's too expensive, or they can't handle the massive running costs of running one of these, all of these estate agents, and they might end up making job cuts then. So all of the potential positive publicity they're going to get now, in 6 months' time, it might be, they might end up undoing quite a lot of that, I think. It wouldn't surprise me if that happened anyway.
I'd imagine, in 6 months' time, you'll get them cherry picking off the sites that are profitable, or at least close to being profitable, and then closing down the others. There's a lot. Apparently, I think Thomas Cook were Northern based as well, weren't they? I've heard there's a lot of duplication in store locations of where they've already got their stores. So the whole diseconomies of scale for duplication is going to be something they'll have to sort out ASAP.
Back in 30.
Is that how many? That's not that bad.
The article I've got on my screen says about 30 locations where there'll be 2 competing high street branches, mostly in Yorkshire and the northeast.
Yeah, that's not too bad. That's a very small percentage, isn't it? The 550. So yeah, maybe it won't be too tricky then. To actually at least not duplicate.
Well, we'll see, won't we? We'll see. Your next story about Fender.
Yes. Okay. So Fender. So this links with both business and economics. So Fender are the US guitar, one of the leading US guitar manufacturers. So Fender guitars, you should have heard of them. So they sell very limited through their own stores to start with. but then they were ordered by the CMA to allow other stores to sell them. So they did that. I think it's from 2013 onwards that was. So they've been doing that, but they've now just started to be investigated for price fixing, which, as we know, is a big topic of economics, and can come up in pricing strategies, obviously. So yeah, they've been not just giving RRPs, which is what they would recommend the price should be. They've actually been given like a minimum price, and if they charge a lower price than that minimum price, then Fender will withdraw their supply. So they are being looked into by the CMA at the moment. And they will likely be fined and ordered to cease with that. And they make a very big percentage of the online sales of instruments. Fender, I think it's about 400 million of the total market, which is about 40%. So that is quite a substantial movement in that market. And you could see prices now dropping on guitars online, and especially Fender. So I mean that's quite interesting.
Some time for Christmas.
Just in time for Christmas. I mean, they're just being investigated, so nothing's actually gone through yet. But they were Casio had something similar, where they got fined 3.7 million in August for doing the same with their online discounts for pianos and keyboards. So there's precedent there. So I imagine they will be hit by a fine, but it all depends as whether it's going to be a big enough fine to deter them from doing it in future.
Yeah. Because obviously there's a lot of competition in that market, and a lot of stores that are general music stores rather than based around a particular brand or sort of just with one particular brand. So if that sort of supply is limited to just their own website.
Well, I know very little about guitars, to be honest. But if they've got 40% of the market share, you would imagine that makes them very much a price maker, and they're just taking advantage of that. I guess an economics student would argue a bit of monopoly
stopping
power.
Themselves being undercut, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. That's what they're doing. I mean, I was talking about that with distribution channels today with my GCSE class. They'd want a cheaper price if you're selling it through retail rather than direct to the customer. The retailer's going to need to make some margin there. So then you have to give an RRP to try and stop them undercutting you if you do sell online as well. So I mean, it's all tricky, and there's pros and cons to both. But yeah, so Fender could either just take away their supply to other stores, which is probably what I would do if I was that worried about it. I think they've got a strong enough brand to sell direct from their website, or they'll just have to let competition go.
Why did they start distributing them to other sales areas? Why didn't they
were told they had too much market share, because I think back in 2013 they had about 60% of the market, so they were declared a monopoly. So they had to
spread it out. Okay.
They were advised to distribute their product through other retailers, so not just a direct distribution channel, and that was to avoid fines.
Because the thing is obviously
40, they might be able to.
If their prices are the same as every other supplier, and the customer's got two options, and one of them is Fender's own website, and the other one is from a different maybe business that they've not heard of, you would tend to lean towards the to the brand themselves, wouldn't you? So
yeah, definitely. I'd pay a bit of a premium for a Fender from that website if I was looking for a guitar, obviously.
Yeah.
Like I would pay a slight premium if I was buying it through the Nike store for a pair of trainers than going Sports Direct.
Yeah.
But only a small premium, probably so.
Yeah.
You're too cool for Sports Direct.
No, just as a Mike Ashley thing, I don't go. Okay, so I've got another story that's been quite big in the news this week, and that's about Tesco. So if you don't know, Tesco's CEO Dave Lewis has announced that he's standing down. Dave Lewis, he's got a nickname. He's called Drastic Dave. And actually, my deputy head, the vice principal at my school, his brother-in-law worked at Unilever with Drastic Dave. His brother-in-law was the guy who was responsible for bringing Ben and Jerry's to the UK. So we owe him a great debt.
Legend.
But he used to work with Dave Lewis, and so since Dave Lewis has been at Tesco, he was appointed in 2014. I've heard little bits and pieces from within Tesco. So apparently, when Dave Lewis was appointed mainly because Tesco had obviously struggled. So in the 2014, when Dave Lewis took over, one of his big things was he was trying to cut costs. So they had a £22 billion worth of debt. They've managed to halve that in the 5 years that he's been there. He turned up apparently and went to the headquarters the first time Dave Lewis went to the headquarters. This is a story, so I don't know how true this is, but this is what I heard. He turned up at the headquarters and there was a couple of helicopters there. And so his response was, "Oh, who's visiting? So how come there's these helicopters here? Is there someone important here?" And the response from the headquarters was, "No, we've got helicopters. These are the helicopters we use to get around." And the first thing he said was, "Yeah, as you do." And the first thing he said was, "No, right, we're not having helicopters." But it just goes to show a little bit of what it was like and why Tesco was struggling a little bit. There's another sort of story. I read this in the news last week when I was reading about Dave Lewis. He made all of his executives take a trip to Norfolk, and they sort of stayed in the rural areas of Norfolk, and he made them do a food shop just so that they could actually see how, the challenges of having a food shop on a budget, because obviously you imagine the life of an executive isn't one of having to try and make the best savings you possibly can. And the problem with Tesco was they were in a bit of a crisis because their prices has risen, but their standards had fallen. So I got a little bit of data on this. In 2012, so this is 2 years before Dave Lewis came in, Tesco's market share was 30.9% in the grocery market. Asda's was 17.5%, Aldi was 3%, and Lidl was 2.8%. So if you take 4 years further forward than that, so 2 years into Dave Lewis's reign, Tesco's market share had fallen to 28.1 from 30.9. Asda's had fallen from 17.5 to 15.7. So they dropped by about 2% each, 2.5% each. Aldi's had doubled from 3% to 6.2%, and Lidl's had increased from 2.8% to 4.5%. And I actually looked at this a little bit further because it's probably the best example I've got of when I teach Porter's theory of competitive advantage. You've got the difference between those low-cost producers, where the businesses sort of make their advantage of having low costs and therefore charging the lowest price possible, and the highly differentiated companies that are maybe extra quality or something unique about their products or their brand. And in the grocery market, it's really easy to split businesses into the three. You've got the low-cost producers like Aldi and Lidl. You've got the highly differentiated companies like Marks and Spencer's and Waitrose. And then you've got a lot that are in the middle. And if you look at the market share from sort of 2012 to now, really, what you'll notice is all the highly differentiated businesses, so Marks and Spencer's and Waitrose, have there or thereabouts stayed the same. If there's been some change, it's not been significant. All of the mid-market ones, so Tesco, Morrison's, Asda, Sainsbury's, etc., they've all lost market share quite heavily. And all of the low-cost ones, so primarily Aldi and Lidl, but also Iceland as well, they've all risen. So it's really obvious where the sort of pattern is going there, and it is that people are realizing that for the price you pay at Tesco, the quality actually doesn't match that, and you're going to get just as good quality. Maybe not quite the product range, but you're going to get just as much quality if you go to Aldi and Lidl. So Dave Lewis has announced he's leaving. He said that he's sort of done everything he wanted to do. He is, as I mentioned, he's reduced the 22 billion debt in half. He has reduced costs by 1.6 billion. The share price is steadily rising, which wasn't the case before he took over. And despite the accountancy scandal in 2016, 2017, he's actually managed to maintain the reputation pretty well.
I think he's done a good job, to be fair. He steadied the ship. And I think they were always gonna decline in market share, whatever they did with the rise of Aldi, Lidl, etc. It was just they were too late to the party reading the demand. You mentioned Porter's competitive forces. Or strategy, sorry. So, they were the classic, weren't stuck in the middle, weren't they, of not being particularly cheap, not being particularly differentiated. So they were just a bit lost. And I think they are still a bit lost.
To both sides, don't you? Because if someone goes to Tesco and they want better quality, they're going to go to Marks and Spencer or Waitrose. If someone goes to Tesco and they want cheaper products, they're going to go to Aldi and Lidl. Whereas unless there's a significant change in circumstance, someone who shops at Aldi is not suddenly going to start shopping at Waitrose. And someone who shops at Waitrose isn't, unless there's a change of circumstance, isn't going to suddenly start shopping at
Aldi. I think what saved the likes of Tesco and Asda really has been the brand loyalty, because a lot of people, especially older generations, will say I've always shopped at Tesco, or it's just literally just the closest one, so convenience based. So I think that has saved them.
Yeah, that's the other thing, because the reason Tesco have such a high market share is because in the sort of 90s and 2000s, it was pretty much a race to open stores. And Tesco won that, and that contributes towards a lot of the debt that they had and the increased costs. So they won that sort of, they called it a space race. They had the most stores, and so as you say, they're the most convenient because they're in the most places. But you look at 2015 was Dave Lewis's first full year in charge of Tesco. They made a 7 billion loss. 4.7 billion of that was down to the devaluation of real estate. So property that they bought that had just lost value, 4.7 billion worth. So although they had built the market share, it was inevitable that it was at some point going to start being chipped away at. And now what you're starting to find is, and I don't know if it's like this where you are, but certainly where I am, Aldi's are opening up all over the place. And that sort of market share that they've got is only going to increase, because I think people are starting to realize
Aldi open up non-stop down here as well.
The quality for the price, it's actually just really good value. I mean,
I the quality a lot in Aldi as well. I think that's the key thing, because I mean, it was on one of the exams, I think 2 years ago, I think it was, that the trend is starting to go away from discount. What people want is going away from the discount, cheap and cheerful. They want the shopping experience, which like the club card gives. So I can't remember. I think it was Aldi were trying to make their own Aldi club card essentially, but how they can improve on Tesco's one.
Got that mysterious middle aisle, though, haven't they? The middle aisle of wonder, where the middle aisle
of wonder. I can't admit to being an Aldi shopper, to be fair.
Oh, of course not.
Are you a seasoned Aldi veteran?
I've dabbled. There's one right next to my gym, so I go when I need to. But they've got this middle aisle in the middle, and like you sort of have your sort of standard stuff that you'd find in every Aldi, but then in the middle there's like this random aisle, and it's just loads of like buckets of like random things. So you might go there and you might find like a drill, and then the next one along will be some slippers, and then the next one along will be like a yoga mat, and the next one along will be like a inflatable unicorn for a swimming pool. They just have like,
God, it sounds like a pound shop.
Yeah, but it kind of, it's just like this weird sort of you know, when you go to a car boot sale and you just see a bunch of random things and you can't account for what's going to be on the next. It's like that basically, but obviously the stuff's new. But people swear by it. Like I mean, you can find anything. You can find anything there. Sometimes the most random stuff. We saw a netball hoop, just a giant netball hoop in the middle of Aldi. You're buying crisps in one aisle, and then you go into their deodorant aisle, and there's just like a netball hoop and a dartboard just there in the middle of a supermarket. It's quite strange.
I mean, who was it that was doing like the fresh lobster and things like that, and the tomahawk steaks? Was that Aldi, or was it Iceland, or I can't remember now.
Aldi next to mine. Maybe there was an Aldi.
They were trying to do all that, weren't they, to raise their profile?
But it'd be interesting to see how much Tesco miss Drastic Dave. I believe they've already appointed Tesco.
Yeah, I think they might. They've appointed one of the old directors of Boots.
Fella, I think, haven't they? Yeah, you're right.
But I mean, I'm not sure Boots is the model really to follow, to be honest.
No.
I think they could be another one in trouble at some point in the future.
The next story is Facebook.
Yes, so an interesting one. So Facebook have been in the news a lot recently for data protection, because they are making what some people are saying is unethical use of people's data and having too much data on you from your Facebook accounts and Instagram, etc. So I think they've decided to essentially stick their middle finger up at the authorities and use all this data to actually make a new product. So they're launching. Actually, I say they're launching. They've launched their own dating app, a bit like Tinder. So essentially, they've gathered all this data about you. There's pictures of you, say, hiking on your Facebook, on your Instagram. And then if you sign up to their free dating app and site, you'll get an extra tab on your Facebook or Instagram, and it will show you a feed of what other people are doing on their feeds that would interest you. So you would see someone that's also hiking up, Mount Nevis or wherever, and then if you like the look of that person and what they're up to, you can comment on their pictures and like their stories or whatever.
Effectively, just opening up a profile to potential dates.
Essentially, yes, and they're doing it for free for now, because they're saying their total number of users, what do they call them? Individual users, so unique users, because some people have more than one account. Their unique users is up to about 2.5 billion now. Really? So they think, it's mad, isn't it? So they think they can really use this data to make the best algorithm for dating, and they think they can blow out the water the likes of I'm trying to think who they are now. Like your Tinders and your Bumbles and your all that. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they can make a go of it. It seems to make sense from their point of view. It's in their field of expertise. They've got the customers there. They know them. It's very much a bit of product development, isn't it? But almost something that they've got a core handle on already. So I think it's fairly low risk and I think it could work.
Definitely. I mean, the problems with Facebook, I think, with something like this are they don't have from what I gather, they don't have a huge young audience.
Well, that's why they bought Instagram, so it's running for Instagram as well.
And I guess that's where they're going to have to try and attack those, because Facebook itself, I mean, you speak to the majority of the students, and I always find it interesting to ask what social medias they use, because I mean, we're sort of 30. We use WhatsApp to message. All of my students use Snapchat to message. It's pretty much all their group chats are on Snapchat, and they don't even really have Twitter anymore, but they've got Instagram. They like pictures really rather than words, don't they?
Yeah, no one has Twitter. I mean, they use Instagram. I think most of mine say they've got Facebook, but they don't really use it much. And a lot of them seem to use Snapchat for their casual chat, and they use WhatsApp for their like school-based chat. Do you know what I mean? If they're working in a group, or so their business chat or their economics chat will be on WhatsApp or Discord or whatever.
They're on Snapchat.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah. But
so, I mean, WhatsApp is slightly dying, I think.
Drive to try and stay relevant, isn't it? And especially with the young people, they're trying to stay relevant. But it's just, it's just the big thing that affects this is people's attitudes towards data privacy, isn't it? Because I know how you almost get a little bit horrified when you mention something on the phone, and then later when you pull out your phone and you go on Facebook, there's advertisements for something you just talked about on your phone, and you think, what are they listening to and what are they hearing?
It's true. Yeah. I mean, I was talking about this little venture of theirs on the dating site and app with someone earlier, and I mentioned about the data protection and would people be happy about that being used to link them to people. And then this other person I was talking to said, well, if you join a dating app, you are literally asked to answer questions and give the info, and everyone does so willingly. Yeah. So it's a bit funny because it's on Facebook and we think, oh, it's not really a dating app, then they shouldn't be using our data, but we happily sign up to whatever other dating website and give it away freely.
A sort of slight distrust of Facebook anyway, isn't it? And that's, I guess, something they've got to try and fix.
Yeah, just to link onto that quickly, they're also looking to be quite dynamic, and they're opening up, the stories they've got on, say, Snapchat, etc. They're trying to make that on Facebook for businesses, so businesses can do like little adverts on the go on social media, like really easily, and it will pop up on people's stories and things. So I thought that was quite cool.
On Instagram. If you scroll through someone's, if you're just going through Instagram stories, you might do like 3 of your friends or followers Instagram stories, and then you'll get a random advert.
They're trying to make it so easy for businesses to do it that it'll just be all the time. Yeah.
I mean, I've got this. I'm wearing one now. Actually, I've got this like sort of like a shirt belt. So it goes underneath your belt, like goes sort of just sort of below your waistband on your trousers, and effectively it's like an elastic belt. It's an adjustable one, and you use it on your shirt before you like put your trousers belt on. And effectively, it holds your shirt in place. So, when you reach into like right on the top of the board and your shirt comes untucked, well, that is a thing of the past for me now. Because
that sounds very progressive of you, Jack.
Yeah, it's because of this Instagram story advert, and I saw it and I was like, wow, that actually looks like a game changer. Because I'm 6'5", so whenever I reach the top of the board, I wear a large shirt, but they're never long enough because I'm quite lanky. So I saw one on an Instagram advert. I went on Amazon to try and find the one that I'd seen, and found a different version of it for £2.99, and it's changed my life. I can't wear a shirt without it.
You'll have to link me, I think.
Yeah, no, honestly,
I'll hold thoughts on it until I see it.
If you're listening to this podcast and you male teachers, if you're interested in I'm going to put a link on Twitter. I'm going to
what percentage you getting in these, Jack?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, how many podcasts do we need to do before we get a theme tune? And similarly, I think this is our first sponsored product. So at the start of the next podcast, if you're going to hear, welcome to the episode 4 of the Business Usual podcast, sponsored by Shirt Belts. But hey, for year 13 students who are potentially going to go out into the world of work next year or potentially going for interviews, you don't want to be the guy who turns up for a job interview and your shirt's untucked and you just look a mess. Similarly, you got prom at the end of the year. You got to start thinking about that kind of stuff now. I'll put a link on Twitter. You can, and then you can tell them that Mr. Goodrich sent you. See if I get a
discount code.
See if I get. Yeah, I think it's like £2.99. So I don't think you can get much of a discount.
Fair play.
Right, let's get this last story done then. So the last story I've got is about Unilever. So it's quite a short one, just something I thought was quite interesting. Follows on with loads of modern trends. about we're doing ethics at the moment. I'm doing ethics with my year 13s, but ethics is a topic that's covered all over business studies. And one thing that you talk about in ethics is the use of sustainable raw materials and the use of plastic and the focus on the environment. And so Unilever have pledged to halve the use of new plastics between now and 2025. So effectively what this is looking for is it's looking for reusable packs, refills, alternative materials to replace new plastics by 2025. They reckon that they currently use about 700,000 tons of plastic each year. So their intention is to halve that to about 350,000. Unilever, if you're not sure who Unilever is, it's a conglomerate business that has a number of brands such as Dove, Comfort, Sure, so loads of the sort of household brands you might find in your bathroom or in your kitchen. You'll be surprised to hear how many of them are owned by Unilever. It's actually quite an interesting task to do. So what I'd recommend, if you've not heard of Unilever or Procter & Gamble before, go on their websites and just have a look at their brands, because what you'll find is a lot of businesses that you assume are competitors are actually owned by the same company. So for example, I'm going to name drop here. So my great-great-great-grandfather founded Fairy soap in the UK.
Really?
Yeah, true.
Very cool.
In a place in Newcastle, and they were called Thomas Headley & Co., and they were sold to Procter & Gamble in like the 1930s, and it was on my grandma's side of the family, so whatever there was of that got passed on through the males in the family. So I'm not any sort of I'm not a rich Fairy soap air kid. I don't have any of the sort of Fairy soap, but I try and buy it because I think it's like respect the family, respect the heritage. But Fairy are owned by the same company that owns a lot of their competing brands as well. So it's almost like they're kind of competing with themselves in a sense, and the same overall company's making all the money. But there's a few other examples of businesses that are doing this. So that's Unilever as an example, but there's a few others. So Sainsbury's have said that they're considering selling milk and fizzy drinks in glass bottles with the intention that you'd bring the glass bottles back so that they could be recycled by Sainsbury's or they could be refilled, which it reminds me of something that used to happen when I was a kid, and I used to go and get Orangina from the local shop. And if you kept the bottle and took it back, you'd get 20p back.
Yeah, it's the milk bottles they used to do that with, didn't they, as well? I remember the milk bottles.
But they definitely used to do it with Orangina.
Cool.
Tesco also have said that they're going to ban brands that use excessive packaging. So there's like a massive shift in terms of thinking, in terms of how much plastic's being used, which is one of the biggest contributors to sustainable resources and the environment.
Yeah, I mean, just to counter that, I saw another story that links with that. I can't remember who it was. Was it Morrison's or Sainsbury's? One of them. They were actually doing an in-store merchandising display because they think they've worked out that actually it does more harm them using paper bags than using plastic bags in the winter, the reusable 20p bag for life type things. So actually it'd be much better for them to sell them and keep selling plastic bags than the 10p or whatever it is, paper bags. Because in bad weather, they were just getting wrecked in one use and then being thrown away.
They weren't reusable. Because there was another thing with McDonald's, wasn't there? When McDonald's brought out, was it McDonald's? They brought out a new straw. I had a student who said he worked at McDonald's. I won't name him because he might get sacked for releasing this data. But he was saying that these new sort of recyclable straws weren't actually recyclable, and they were apparently worse than the original ones they were replacing. But it was just a PR thing, wasn't it? So
yeah, I did see a story where was it Costa? Who was it that used them as well? One of them used them as well, and they were saying that the average customer's using like 2 to 2.5 straws or something to actually drink their drink. Oh no, it was McDonald's. The McDonald's milkshakes. They were using 2 to 3 straws to actually drink one. So actually, when you added it all up, it was about equal for plastic. Recyclable
Sometimes
plastic.
You wonder whether these decisions are made because they actually believe in the ethics behind them, or whether they're just sort of marketing ploys.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know, isn't it, until you give it a go, I suppose. But I mean, you would have thought they'd be bright enough to know that a paper straw is not gonna suck up milkshake.
If it is sort of for maybe profit-driven reasons, if it's having a positive impact, then it's worth doing. So yeah, there we have it. So we've got 5 stories there. We will put some news article links to the articles that we read when we were putting those stories together and finding them for you. We'll put those in the description on the YouTube video. We'll also put them on Twitter. You can follow us both on Twitter. It's in the description. You can find the links to those there. We'll also put together a few little review questions that teachers might want to use to just check that you've been the students have been listening to these and paying attention. And we'll also get a Kahoot going as well, and we'll get all this posted. So it's Thursday night now. We're posting tonight, so some of the rest of the stuff might come up tomorrow morning. But thank you for listening. Thanks, Mike.
Yep. Cheers, guys. Adios.
Yeah.